The Long Tomorrow by Leigh Brackett. So I had recently read The Best of Leigh Brackett, and this is a collection of short stories. And I did a video with Richard and Matt where we discussed a lot of the different stories in here. And Leigh Brackett, I think, is known as like the queen of space opera, and a lot of these stories fit that kind of subgenre, and they're really good. A lot of them take place on Venus, and some of them on Mars, and really had a lot of fun with this book, and was really turned on to the quality of Leigh Brackett's writing. And I knew that she had written a post-apocalyptic book that had to do with Mennonites and how they kind of inherited a post-nuclear Holocaust United States. And that idea just really intrigued me. And then I saw Joseph Reed's, he read and reviewed this book, and Omnivorous Reader also read and reviewed this book. I didn't want to watch their videos before I read it, so I went ahead and read it, and I'll post all those videos down in the description. They both did a really good job covering this book. And what I have here is the original Ace paperback. This came out in 1955. That was when the story was copyright. I believe it was shortlisted for a Hugo Award in 1956, but it lost. I also have a Ballantine reprint of this one, and if you're looking for this book out in the wild, you might be able to find this one a little bit easier than the Ace paperback. But let's just get into it. So like I said, I knew kind of the basic premise, and I thought this book would kind of explore how these Mennonites took over the United States through, they had already shunned technology, so it makes sense. It makes perfect sense that groups like this would be better suited to survive and thrive in a post-apocalyptic United States. But really, the book, that's just kind of a statement of fact in the beginning, and it sets the foundation for the story, and the story just goes up from there. And what seems to have happened is there was a nuclear war. We don't know if the whole world was affected, but the United States was definitely affected, and all the major cities were wiped out. And there's not even stated how many survivors were left, but it seems to be 10% or less of the population survived. And out of those survivors, there's probably many that perished soon after that. But these Mennonites and these Amish, they basically thrived in this setting, and their populations just bloomed, and they ended up taking over Washington, and they also wrote a 13th Amendment to the United States. And I'll just read that for you here. It's right next to the copyright page. And it says, "No city, no town, no community of more than 1,000 people or 200 buildings to the square mile shall be built or permitted to exist anywhere in the United States of America." So that's the setting we have. And when we start off, we have our main character, Len, and he's a young boy who lives in one of these Mennonite communities who they mostly just farm. His parents are Mennonites. His grandmother still remembers the old ways. So this is where I said there was like 2 generations where people can still remember some of the things they had, like TV and some things like that. Now, Len also has a cousin named Esau, and they become kind of the 2 main characters of this novel, with Len mostly being in the focus. So when the book starts off, there's traders that come through these towns, and they aren't Mennonites, but they're taken in and people trade with them. And this is just a common thing. And some of these traders are coming through the town, and then these kids hear wind of some sort of preaching or some sort of thing that's going to be going on in the evening, and they're not allowed to go. So of course that kind of, intrigues them. And so they sneak out of the house and they hide and they watch this event kind of unfold. And what happens is we find out that it's not only a preaching, but they're calling out one of these traders for having banished technology and, ideas that aren't allowed anymore. And he's basically called out. And what ends up happening is he ends up getting stoned to death by the community members. And it's this really horrific scene that these kids witness, and they don't know what to make of this. They hear whispers of this town called Barterstown, and all these things just kind of plant some seeds in their head, like what out there could be so important that we watch this man get stoned to death, So they start kind of rooting around, and Esau ends up finding a banished piece of technology in one of these traders' camps, and he steals it. And he shows it to Len, and they go out into the woods and they hide it, and they're trying to figure out how to make this thing work. They end up stealing some books from a local town person and to help them try to figure out how to make it work. And in the end, they end up getting caught and punished by their parents and the community. And so a while later, these thoughts are stuck in their head, and they realize that they can't really live in this community anymore. So they end up running away from home into another town that isn't really a Mennonite town, but there's this Mennonite influence over the whole United States. So everybody has to abide by this 13th Amendment. And they end up making it to this town and trying to kind of, make their own way in the world. And I think that's kind of where I want to leave the plot of this book. They go on kind of an adventure. I guess I'll talk a little bit more. They go on a little bit more of an adventure. You'll find out if this Barterstown was real or not. There's another one of the traders. His name was Hofstetter. He sees these seeds, this twinkle in these boys' eyes, and he kind of protects them and steers them out of trouble a few times. And he becomes a central character in this book as well. And you get a whole great, satisfying story. There's some adventure in here. You'll get all these plot lines resolved. You'll see Len getting tested from family, friends, foes, all the way to the very end of the book, to the conclusion, which I thought was done really well. And in all, I just absolutely love this book. Now, if I took out my personal experience of this book, I would probably give this a 4-star just because of how good the writing was and the story and some of the themes that she explores in here. But I have some personal experiences that made me really sympathize and empathize with our main character. And because of that, this is a 5-star book for me, but I know a lot of people probably won't have that same connection. And when we're talking about themes, there's the obvious themes of the threat and the fear of nuclear war. There's the, religion against secular knowledge. If technology is bad, if grouping too many people together is bad. There's a lot of themes that are gone over. But the theme that stood out for me, and, some people might not have even got this, is the internal struggle of our main character, Len, because there's many times in this book where he thinks there's something wrong with him. And what he comes to find out, and what I've come to find out, is there's just people think differently. And it should be a very easy thing to understand, and it is. But you can find yourself in a situation where there's just no easy way out of it. You have to make a compromise. And I think Leigh Brackett really does a really good job writing the internal struggle going through his head this whole time. Is there something wrong with him wanting to learn more, to get the technology back up and running, to do all these things that aren't permitted anymore? So she wrote those sections that are inside of his head so well, and I can tell you I've had those same internal struggles, and she did just an amazing job bringing that out. So if you do want to read this book, look for that in there. Maybe it's more apparent than I thought, but it's what really stood out in this book for me, and it was just great. It was probably maybe the best book I think I've read this year. If not, it's in the top 3 easily. So if you see a copy of that one, go out and look for it. It's not that long, but I slowly read it. I slowly digested it, and it was fantastic. So next up, I'm reading The Kinsman Saga by Ben Bova. I needed something a little different, a little more maybe lighthearted, but I don't even really know what this book is about too much. So just look for that review coming out next. And once again, thanks for watching.